Hi, everybody. My name is Doug Leslie with the Christian Ministry Alliance. Thankful that you've joined us today for our online 60-minute webinar on how to recruit a successful board. For those of you who are not familiar with the Alliance, just a quick moment about who we are so you're brought up to speed. We are a national alliance of local churches and ministry parachurches, mostly on the smaller end of the scale. So if you're a smaller organization, we're the alliance that comes alongside to help clear the organizational clutter from the leaders' plates. Simply put, that just simply means that we really love churches and ministries, and we know lots of leaders of those smaller organizations were not designed for operational intensity. And so we come alongside and help them manage that process, clear the clutter, so to speak, help them align their systems and their mission with business functions on the back end so they can get on with their mission. And by doing so, we like to say we provide credible, practical, and affordable services, resources, and consulting for ministries. So if you are a board member or a leader of a smaller organization and or church, we would love to be making contact with you. We'll just come alongside, answer any questions that you might have, help you along the way. And if you feel like that it's good for your organization to join the Alliance, we welcome you in the fold. That's how that works. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. We'll get more into a few of those items at the end of today's presentation. Regarding today's webinar, just a few points of interest for you. We're going to be together for approximately 60 minutes, like we said before. And think of this as more of a classroom environment. And I say that because we're not on a traditional traditional webinar platform today. We are working on a meeting platform, but that allows everyone to see everybody else. And if you are in the middle of a question and you have a question that pops into your mind as our presenter is speaking today, we want you to be sure to feel free to raise your hand, speak up. This is more of a classroom environment and not a lecture webinar. So if you have a question, interrupt us. That's okay. And you ask your question and we'll make sure that it gets answered. Our goal is to have the questions answered and not just get through material. So there is a difference on that. And number three, of course, just ask plenty of questions. If you have a question, ask it. There's no wrong question regarding this stuff. We want to make sure it's clear in your minds on how to most appropriately move forward in your organization. Our presenter today is Tom Okarma. Tom is a respected nonprofit leadership consultant, nationally recognized specifically with an expertise in board governance. He has a lot of materials he'll be going through today, and don't worry about if you can't keep up with all of it. The slides that he's going through today, we will push out to you at the end of today's webinar, and make sure you get an email linked with those slides, links back to Tom's site, and being able to follow up with him if you need to do that. So that being said, we welcome Tom Okarma to the screen. I'm going to turn it over to him and allow him to take control of the screen and move forward in his presentation. We'll connect afterward.
Before we talk about who to be on the board, I think it's important to know what the characteristics are of an effective board so that those folks that you recruit to join you, you know they've got what it takes in order to comprise a successful board. We're going to talk about how to build a board for impact. We're going to talk about some tools and some tips you'll be able to use on your own. And then I want to talk about characteristics of effective directors. There may be some great subject matter experts, but they may not be a good fit for what you need for your board. We're going to talk about that. And then I want to talk about some tips for finding the right candidates. How do you do that? So first of all, I would say the boards that deliver kingdom impact are intentionally built. They're strategically built. Sadly, all too often, boards are put together as board chairs and executive directors are scrambling to fill a couple of spots, and you end up with a poor match of talent along with the board that's needed. And I think it's based on skills and competencies and where the ministry is going and what the board and how the board can help the ministry get to that point. So I think that's an important piece. Another thing that board does is they define what the impact is. And with crystal clear clarity, they say what the mission is, what the purpose is, so everyone understands. And that way the board can watch the budget, watch the goals, watch strategic plan, watch who's being recruited onto the board, making sure that they are a fit for what it takes in order to make the ministry effective. And then they follow best practices as well for how to lead a board. So you want good people, team players, and get along and are collaborative and believe in your ministry. The point I want to emphasize from a moment earlier is, what is impact for your ministry? Is it baptisms? Is it conversions? Is it helping people find jobs? Is it a social service agency helping people find jobs and getting to the point where they don't need your help anymore? Is it working with teen moms? Is it working with veterans? Whatever it might be, you need to be crystal clear in what that is, so that you can recruit the best people on the board who will have an interest in that. So how does the board drive kingdom impact? And by that, I'm saying, what is it that a board does that helps you achieve your mission? And taking a step back from that, who are the people that will help us do that? So you're always looking at, what does the board need to do, and who can help me make that happen? So what a board does for kingdom impact, first they define what is kingdom impact, and then they make sure that the goals and the strategic plan and the budget and the operations and the marketing all coincides with that mission, with the kingdom impact you're trying to get. And then they monitor the results to make sure that things are complied with. So when you're looking for the right board members, you want people that are willing to look at the results, look and see what's happening, not be afraid to raise their hand and question whether things are getting off track a little bit or not. You also want a board that's going to maintain a consistent focus. So you need individuals who will stay focused on the prize, where you're headed. The best slide maybe that I put out that where people have a big aha moment is this one. And it's by Jim Collins, very well noted, former Stanford professor and consultant and researcher. Everything he does is based on data. So I really love his work. And his way of talking about a board is get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats on the bus. So if you've got a board that is mismatched with the talent, you're not going to get very far. So you want to make sure that you recruit the right people onto the board in the first place. I was working with one board in suburban Chicago, where I used to live, and it was a group of fine arts people. And the whole board was fine arts people, no real business people per se. They didn't really understand how to run the organization part of their operation, and it was a mess because they were overweighted in people who understood the fine art world, but they didn't know how to run a business, and that was a hard group to kind of corral and to bring some business discipline to their operations. I should say that the right people on the bus, that's part of what we're going to talk about, and give you some tools to decide who are the right people for you. If it's a small or a startup ministry, then the right people are probably ones that are going to have to roll up their sleeves and help. It'd be a working board, operational board. If you're bigger and you've got staff to work on a lot of the day-to-day things, then maybe it's just a pure governance board only. So you want to make sure you're recruiting the right people for where your ministry is at its life cycle. If you're brand new, you've got people that are going to roll up their sleeves and probably be picking the color of the napkins for your gala, for your annual event. For a bigger board, more focused on governance, then you want to stay out of those kind of details. And by all rights, the right people don't want to spend their time on those details. So building a fort, you truly are building it brick by brick, one at a time. And to do that, you need to understand, the board people need to understand the role as they're being recruited before they're even on. They need to understand what the expectations are and what the role is. So they need to understand that there may be an operational piece to their responsibility, or maybe it's just a governance piece of monitoring, tracking results, etc. They understand what the mission, vision, and the values are of your agency, and they subscribe to them. You want to avoid, if your values include respect for the individual and transparency and integrity, what have you, you certainly don't want to be recruiting people onto the board who are like a bull in the china shop, for instance. You also want ones that are going to buy into the mission statement and buy into your strategic plan. You want collaborative partners on the board, not ones who are just there to be difficult. You also want ones that understand what the legal and the ethical requirements that are members of the board. These are things to get out in advance so that when you recruit the right people, they understand what they're getting into. It's unfortunate, but sometimes new board members won't know all the things that are expected of them until they're on the board for a while. And then they find out the hard way that these are things that they really can't agree with. And then you lose a person after just a couple of months. They are also there as an ambassador, and they should know that there is a role, whether it's giving presentations to community groups or just being really good at delivering a 30-second elevator speech to others to help raise interest in your agency. So they need to understand that. Next point, I'd like to cover the 3 characteristics of an effective board. These are high-level buckets. So as you're recruiting people onto your board, identifying who to go onto the board, you understand what an effective board looks like. So you're bringing the people on that'll be a good fit. First of all, an effective board and its directors understands their role in the organization, and they use the strategic plan as their guide, as their North Star, and they be as supportive as possible for the executive director. So as far as understanding the role goes, they understand the governance versus mission and their operations and their legal integrity and their responsibilities. And they understand about setting expectations and controlling them, setting reasonable ones and having metrics. Guided by their strategic plan, they will approve, usually develop the strategic plan, and then the board is built around the strategic plan. I was on one board and we reported to represent a whole county, but really 17 board members only came from 3 different towns. So we saw that as a weakness, and we had to make a change there, and we did, and it helped strengthen our organization. Built around the strategic plan. I've been on other boards which have had to do a lot more marketing and advertising and promoting, and we had nobody that really understood marketing, and we relied on outside sources. So we wanted to find someone who knew social media marketing, how to get our word out, branding. And so we looked for someone who could help us in that regard. And that was very helpful. It just made our job easier. No one board member is perfect at everything, but the ones that you want on should be bringing some competency, some skill with them to help. And then they need to make sure that the program results are all monitored and they're watched closely.
Hey, Tom, can I interrupt you for one question here?
Yeah.
How often, because you brought up a really good point in terms of early on, a lot of boards need to be operational in scope as opposed to just pure governance. How often do you run across for small organizations where they're thinking they're a governance board, but they really need to be operational, and there's a conflict in terms of understanding that reality?
Well, especially with new organizations, those people should understand that they've got 2 hats that they're wearing, and the operational one is a critical one. They're probably being recruited to fill that operational side, whether it's stuffing envelopes, mailing out letters, helping with the back room at the agency. And then they need to know that that hat comes off and the governance hat comes on separately, and that's where they're monitoring results, monitoring legal activity. So they need to be reminded of both. And a good board chair will try to set up the agenda that way so it's clear which hat is being used at what time. Otherwise, people get confused, right, and they mix the hats together, or they don't do both jobs, which they're supposed to do.
Good. Thank you.
The other point is supporting the executive, senior executive. You want a board that's collaborative with the senior executive, and sometimes, especially with bigger boards, there can be a friction point that happens between the board and the leader. And what's important is to try to be as collaborative and supportive as a senior executive possible. I've seen a lot of articles written about board making sure that the executive director is taking care of their own soul, that they're taking care of themselves, that they're not burning themselves out. So once in a while, it's probably a good idea for a board chair to pick up the phone or stop over, talk to the executive director, CEO, whatever the title is you're using, see how they're doing, check it out, because especially in smaller or newer organizations, that person's living with this job really 24/7. It's an all day, everyday thing, and they just need a break and know that someone cares for them. This tool I've got showing here is something you'll be able to download, and it's the 8 steps that I've laid out for how to build a board. Too often, nonprofit boards will skip some of these steps, see somebody that looks good and try to grab them without really doing a due diligence and thinking it through. This may feel a little processy until you tried it a few times, but you'll find the right people will get through this filter, and the wrong one, the bad fits, or at least bad fit for where you're at in your life cycle of your agency, they'll sort of sift themselves out, filter themselves out for another day. But you start by identifying potential candidates, making a list of them, developing a relationship. You want to start engaging them in some projects, maybe sitting on a board committee, maybe running an event or what have you, just to get a sense of how they operate, how they act, do they play nice? And then you maybe get to the point of inviting them to apply to be on the board. The tool that you'll download has got a lot of explanation of all these different steps. I'm just showing you that there is a process you can use, and it can be very helpful to get the right ones on the bus and avoid having to ask somebody to step down.
How often do you think when you through that process, if you can go back to that first one again, that previous slide, when someone starts this process, Tom, how long, what kind of time frame are we talking about typically? Is there a typical time frame that you should invest in someone before asking them to apply to the board, or does this go in rapid succession?
No, I think it's a longer, slower process, yeah. And you give it a lot of time. I think people should be looking for future board members all the time, and they should keep a short list of potential candidates in their desk and try to engage them from time to time. Maybe invite them to a meeting, maybe meet with them periodically, let them know to measure their interest in your cause. It's something that you do ongoing. Otherwise, you end up just trying to fill spots at the last moment. Right. Partly to answer your question, the next slide is a tool, another tool I can use. This document, again, you can download it, change it up all you want. This is a tool that some boards use to identify the characteristics of current board members and take a look and see where the gaps and overlaps are. So if you have, say, 6 board members, current members, and you check a box for what they bring to the table, and you can change the demographic information to competencies, to skill sets, to job skills, the experience, whatever you want. This one is 3 pages. And you check a box for where they're at, and then you take a look at your candidates and you see if certain competencies are going to be stepping off the board and you don't have that filled. One board I'm with, the chair of the finance committee is stepping down next year, 2021. Well, in fairly short order, we need to identify a financial person to come in to step in to take that position. And the same can be if you've got a couple of good business owners who are very savvy looking at financials and looking at plans, but if they may be term limited and have to step down, you probably need to replace that competency. It's a competency that's probably very helpful. So, or an attorney perhaps. So that way you don't get caught short with too many people that are good in one area, but you've got this big gap there in a whole nother area. And that's something you do over a long period of time. It's there. Well, farther down, I have a couple examples of where these people might be located, but right. I found the successful boards that are impactful have a working list of people that they want to stay in touch with, and send them reports periodically or send them the newsletter just to let them know you're thinking about them and that they're in the loop and they're on your radar screen.
And when you say send them newsletters, when you're talking about, I don't want to say the term grooming, that seems weird, but when you're enticing someone in and you want your, because the long term is for you to invite them onto your board. But those newsletters and those should be a personal email, not just stuck on your email list.
No, right. And I agree. And if you do snail mail, then maybe a little personal note,
Right.
thought you'd find this interesting, or we're doing some great things here, or our impact is growing. It doesn't have to be a long letter, but you let them know you're thinking about them, and then you start measuring interest, and that opens the door for you to chat with them. And then it takes away them saying, well, I don't know what you guys are up to, what you're doing. I'm kind of busy. You get them filled in on what you're up to these days now.
Yeah. So fill the funnel and keep them engaged.
Right.
Personally. Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a great board member. Again, these are the kind of people that you want to be recruiting. Well, one is they demonstrate a support for the mission, and there's various levels of that. A point on this issue I would make is you don't want someone that's just there to fill out a resume or just trying to network. There needs to be some kind of interest in your mission and what your cause is. Exhibits a certain level of biblical wisdom. That is a wise thing to have. Not everyone has been to seminary, so you've got different levels of that. But these are Christian organizations, and a Christian board should be acting Christianly and make decisions Christianly. And there are some very popular big churches that I know of that the boards were asleep at the wheel. They didn't act Christianly. They didn't make the right call or didn't do things in a Christian manner, and they got all kinds of problems now. So if you're part of a Christian ministry, the directors should act Christianly, and that's more than just pray at the beginning and pray at the end, and maybe pray for grace if there's a meal involved.
Yeah.
They need to embrace and perform in their primary role. This is where they're recruited for a specific reason. They need to agree, yes, I'm happy to be on your board. I will be one of the financial people on your board, look at your finances, your results, or I will overview the marketing that you're doing. Or I am familiar with your cause and I will help monitor your programs or make suggestions on your programs, whatever it might be. And they need to be okay with this. Yeah. Some people don't. They want to get on a board, but they don't want to do finances. They do finances all day. They're a CPA, but maybe they're a good critical thinker. So you still would want them, but understand you need to fill that financial piece if they're not going.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that just because someone does something specific in the marketplace, that may not be the role they want to fill in your nonprofit board.
Right, and that doesn't disqualify them. It just means you got one of those boxes you got to get checked by someone, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They understand the board role and responsibilities. This is an area that I think some ministries could improve on, and that's just clarifying expectations. Here's the role of the board member. Here's a job description, and you Google them. There's tons of them online. You can just download for free, and what the responsibilities are, from fiduciary responsibilities to owning the results. Another one is a bias towards action. You don't want people who are going to come to meetings and sit like a potted plant. You recruited them on because you respect their opinions, you respect their skills, and you want them to engage. You want to move the ball forward. The fear here is that everybody sits back and waits to find out what the executive director wants to do, and then they just support him or her. And that's not healthy. That's not safe, really. What you need are people who are not afraid to raise their hand and ask the questions. Something doesn't smell right. I'm not following you. Please clarify. They're engaged. They show up for the meetings. They come prepared. They've got everything lined up. They go to the meetings they're supposed to go to. I mentioned critical thinker before. Someone who, when they hear a good idea, they think it through before they say something or vote on it. Because sometimes a great idea here, when you push that button, some problem develops somewhere else, or something else has to maybe get put on the back burner because there's not enough time or money. So a critical thinker kind of thinks things through, and you'd want a couple of people like that. And someone who gets the governance versus volunteer versus participant hat. Well, a problem I've seen is with a little bit bigger boards, which are a little more governance oriented than operational is they show up at a golf outing to be part of the volunteer group and they act like they're a board member. Well, you really don't have your board member hat on there. You may be volunteering to help with the golf outing, but you're not acting as a board member there. So that's a separate role. Or the board member comes out of a board meeting and goes and talks to some of the staff, tells them what to do or stop doing whatever, completely verboten. That should not be. So a good board member understands where their role starts and where it stops. And then being an ambassador, you want ones that'll be a good ambassador. And not everyone's a public speaker. Not everyone has a huge index card list of well-financed friends, but everyone can do something. And so you want to make sure that that person can play some role. So it always doesn't fall on the executive director. And then Christ-centered and spirit empowered. This next section are Thomisms. These are sort of things that I learned through getting a bloody nose or opening the door and hitting my face with it. Number one is don't just settle for a person because you got a couple open spots. As long as you've got enough to meet the minimum requirement of your bylaws, look for the right people to put on the board based on where your organization is headed in the next 2-3 years. You're better off keeping an open spot in your hip pocket, waiting for the right person to come along, rather than taking a marginally helpful person and then you're full up and you can't bring on that next person that you find 6 months down the road that will be a good help. Good volunteers don't necessarily make good directors. Good volunteers are good volunteers, but they don't necessarily think globally, think about the big picture. They don't necessarily know how to collaborate with others. You know, someone who might be a great golf outing leader, Attila the Hun kind, who you need to run the program. We have 200 golfers and food trucks and dinner and what have you. That person may or may not make a good board member because you need to be collaborative and a good team player, where somebody who's running the golf outing needs to be in control and managing and making things happen and not afraid to make decisions. Major donors don't necessarily make good directors. They can get caught in a trap. One board I had already stepped off of, but was staying close to the executive director. She told me about someone who wanted to write a check for $100,000 for this operation and wanted to be on the board. I guess he felt he was kind of buying his way on, but he had definite ideas on how he wanted to spend that $100,000. So I think he was just trying to protect the money he was going to put in there. It only marginally fit where that ministry was headed. It definitely would have been a bit of mission creep and would have taken the agency off its eyes off the ball. They turned it down because they saw that it was going to be more of a distraction than a help. Yeah. So major donors, you just got to be careful. Some are great team players. Some feel like they've got like 2 votes to every other director is 1 vote. Just need to be careful. Okay. Identifying candidates that fit specific needs. This is a little bit repetitive, but I just bring it up. Don't bring on a bunch of people just to have warm fuzzies, friendly people. The first book I wrote was a story about a woman who had a nonprofit. It was a food pantry and clothing closet in a town that had a recession. And it's a storybook. It's not a textbook. And her board consisted of her husband, her sister, and a couple of friends and neighbors. And it was fine until they had a crisis. No one knew how to raise money. No one knew how to do marketing. No one knew how to watch the financials. No one knew what to do. So you want to make sure you're identifying individual candidates who have specific skills to enhance your board, so your board can be used to leverage your ministry efforts. Look beyond friends, big donors, relatives, and neighbors. If they don't work out well, you got a problem telling your brother-in-law or sister-in-law that you're not going to extend a second term to them or asking them to step down. Same with neighbors. So there is a business piece to this, which sometimes gets lost. Truly, most ministries are run from the heart, but you're still running a business per se. And to be fair to the donors and your supporters or the foundations that support you, and to be fair to the clients that you've chosen to serve, people that aren't able to pull their weight on the board probably need to be replaced or not renewed. ideally not put on there in the first place. You want to get the right one. So there's enough of a straight talk and a business atmosphere and truth. People speaking with truth and moral courage to say what needs to be said. Avoiding too many like-minded candidates. You don't want a group of yes people on the board. You want ones that are team players, but that doesn't mean they always agree with everything. They're not afraid to raise an issue or push back when something just doesn't smell right. That's why I like having a business person or two on a board, because they look at it a little more objectively. They look at the financials, they look at the goals, they look at the plan, and they say, is there alignment here? Is everything tight? Or are we all over the map? Are we scattered? So what you want is somebody that's not afraid to say, is this really what we're supposed to be doing? Because especially with smaller ministries, you don't have a big margin to make a mistake. You take a jumbo multi-million-dollar operation, they can make a mistake or two, and it's not going to threaten the mission and the organization. But a smaller one or a brand new one, they don't have a lot of room. So the bets that they place really have to be correct and make sense. Okay, strategically rude life. Sometimes life experiences are big help. People have been around the block, and then people who are straight talkers and hold nothing back. I like that. I appreciate that. I respect that. And straight talkers can keep you out of trouble. Quite frankly, when no one wants to raise their hand and say this doesn't feel right, the straight talker is the one who says, "Time out. We're headed down a wrong path."
And that's an important topic too. I'm going to interrupt, Tom, because
Yep.
a lot of smaller organizations, because you mentioned it, that they're run from the heart, right? And so they oftentimes, a straight talker may come across as abrasive or attacking on their mission, when I think it's good for executive directors to understand you want the straight talkers because they keep you in alignment. And it's not a personal jab, it's a business oriented strategic direction comment that isn't a personal thing, and you can't take that personally. And so don't shy away from recruiting those kind of personalities to your board.
Right. The distinction is you want them to attack the issue, not the individual.
Yeah, it's good.
If everyone's goal is mission is to accomplish the mission, that's okay. You can kind of tell if someone's getting personal or if they got a hidden agenda, in which case the board chair needs to pull that board member aside at some point and let them know that that's not going to be tolerated. And we're all here to do the same thing. We've all got different ideas. We respect each other. We want to hear divergent ideas, but your idea may not float all the time for whatever reason. So yeah.
Good.
All too often people get on a board and they don't really understand what their responsibilities are. And I started talking about this a little bit earlier, but things like meeting attendance, it's not just the board meetings, but it's committee meetings. And, to write down what percentage of board meetings should go. There's a consultant I know back in the Midwest. He developed a chart for his clients, and the board chair and executive director sit every January with each board member, and they write out what that person is going to donate or raise dollar-wise, what events they're going to support and sponsor, what events they're going to just be a volunteer at, and other things they're going to do. And then they check on that periodically during the course of the year. Now that is really specific and really granular. I don't necessarily go along with that, but it's not fair to recruit somebody onto the board and not let them know that there's a give or get requirement of some kind of donation or support from people, or that there's going to be a number of committee meetings. Maybe someone can afford board meetings, but they don't have time for committee, or they travel too much. So, it's good to flush those sorts of things out in advance. And talk about the fiduciary responsibility. There are legal requirements. That's why there's directors and officers insurance. And the people need to know what they are, and that you're going to comply with them all as well. So this is a document you'll be able to download, change it around any way you like, make it fit your operation. Oh, conflict of interest, I should mention that briefly. Make sure that all conflicts of interest are surfaced. Sometimes people are willing to help out and do something at cost. Board members are willing to do something at cost for the ministry. Well, the board needs to sign off on that and what the cost is. So people can't come back later and say that Director A is making money off the ministry. Sometimes conflicts of interest are okay as long as everybody knows about it and they approve it. Sometimes conflicts of interest just can't happen. So the board member needs to excuse him or herself from voting on an issue or whatever the case is. Another way to recruit and then to maintain good people is have a training program, periodic training, especially orientation for new board members. This tool you'll be able to download has got a lot of topics. I think there's 20 different topics there for training. You may not use them all. You may use 5 of them. I don't know. But it lays out all the potential things that you might want to train up and orientate your new board members on so they don't come and show up quiet and embarrassed for the first 6 months and don't say anything. Or they're not afraid to push back for another director who's just been there a long time and likes to throw his or her weight around. If a board member sits there for the first 6 months and doesn't say much, you're starting to lose a lot of valuable help for the reason you recruited that person onto the board. So you want to make them feel equipped with what's going on, equipped with the issues of the day, equipped with how things get done on the board, and so that they can start contributing as soon as possible. Recruiting and landing high-value board candidates. Now, this is maybe what some people thought this was going to be about, the tips. Well, here's just some ideas for recruiting and landing the high-value candidates. First, as I said, it's a year-round activity. Maintain a list of potential candidates, add to it periodically. But like I said in the first sentence, begin with the end in mind. Where is your agency, your ministry at this point of the life cycle? Is it at the point where it's got a good strategic plan? It just needs to enhance the board with people that can help open some doors to make it happen? Or is it a fixer-upper? Do you have some problems and you need some people that are good at coming in and figuring out what's working, what's not working? Maybe it's a board that feels like things are going okay, but you're not really moving the ball forward. You're not really making the big gains that you would hope to gain. So maybe you need a fixer-upper kind of person or two on there to help fix whatever's not working right. I would say it's first know where you want to go, then know what you want to do, and then that'll tell you who to recruit. Don't just look for individuals. Find people with the competencies, the skill sets, the experiences that'll help you move the ball forward. Not just, well, so-and-so's a nice person, or they're a lot of fun, or they give a lot of money, or they're always volunteering, they make a great board member. Well, not necessarily. They might make a good donor, they might make a good volunteer, but that doesn't mean they're a good board member. And the matrix model, that's the chart I showed earlier with all the boxes of board members and candidates and the skill sets. Volunteers, donors, and friends don't necessarily make good board members, and that's okay. That's okay that they don't do that. There's no harm in that. Other boards directors, there may be other agencies, not too unlike what you're doing, or at least in the same space, who have competency, directors have competencies that will be helpful to you to recruit when they step off that other board. So consideration, who can help you achieve your mission? I wouldn't recruit anybody onto the board that doesn't bring something to help us achieve our mission. Otherwise, they're just taking up space, and what use are they? Sometimes geographic spread's important. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. And then sometimes it's skills. Maybe another executive director is a good idea, or a retired executive director, someone who's been in the shoes of the ED, knows what's involved, and someone that can help. Has your perspective. That can be very helpful to have someone who understands what the ED is going through sitting on the board, especially during executive sessions. Then selling them. What's your compelling story? Because good people, good candidates, high value candidates, they have no lack of opportunities to get on a lot of boards.
Right.
And when you get your chance to talk to them about joining your board, you need to give them a compelling story as to why your board is the one they should join, not somebody else's down the street. Maybe it's the results that you're delivering, the community impact, the effectiveness. You got a stellar reputation. Maybe you've got a great plan that's very compelling, very exciting, that they can get behind, and you think they might be interested in being a part of it. Maybe client testimonies. These are very powerful. Sometimes they're at annual galas. There'll be videos, or there'll be live clients who've been helped by the ministry. Very moving, very compelling. That can help a person decide, yes, I want to be part, I want to deliver that. Or past relationships. Maybe people know someone else who'd be a great one. And so that person can help make a phone call to help get that person over the hump, to say, I heard you talk to Tom about joining his board. Let me tell you, they really do great work. They have fun, but their business, their meetings are impactful. They don't waste your time at these nighttime meetings. They get in, they do the business and get out. That can be very strong towards getting somebody to go along and get on your board. A couple final thoughts as you look at your board and you think about the new members to come on. I've changed these questions a little bit, but just pretend you were starting your ministry today, brand new, no history, but you know your client, you know your area, your community. If you're starting a ministry today, brand new, what would your board look like in order to increase impact? Who should be on the board? Do you have the right people on the board today to do the impact? And maybe you had the right people 3 years ago, but the board or your community is at a different place. You need a different mix. Think about what your board would look like and how it would operate if Jesus served on it. What would your priorities be if Jesus were there helping set the priorities? And do you have board people either recruiting in the pipeline or on the board that can help make that happen? So there's a few more questions that you can ask yourself. They should cover the points. We lose track of that. We don't own these ministries. God does. We're just running it for him. So what does that look like? What does that mean? A couple of resources, a couple of books. These are very helpful. I know most of these authors personally. Mastering the Management Buckets, Good Governance for Nonprofits, great books. These are written in a very pedestrian fashion. They are not 400 level college textbooks that sentences are 4 lines long. A lot of great tips, a lot of great ideas. 3 more here. One about leading change, because every ministry at one point or another needs to tweak, needs to make change. E-Myth Revisited, great book. It's about small business, but just switch the word and make it nonprofit or ministry or church, and it applies there. The 1 Hour Plan for Growth was written by Joe Campbell. I think he's out of Kansas City. He's a believer, and he's done a great job with a simple, down-home way to come up with a plan. If you got no strategic plan, his book, short book, has some checklists and suggestions on how to develop one fairly quick, a good working one quickly. Now, I've written 2 books, Break Through the Ick Factors, that's the one I mentioned earlier, and a new one, From the Inside Out. And that's written to the leader, leading yourself, leading your board, leading your ministry, leading change. And the few that I've read it so far, that I sold it to, having good feedback. So those are a couple other resources available if you like. My website, I've got about 300 blog articles I've written, from 400 to maybe 700-800 words. Here are some tools, some other tools which I didn't mention that you can download for free, no charge, tomokarma.com/lead. See if any of them work for you. Take them, change them. They're not copywritten, so put them on your own stationery. Make them fit, make them work for you. And that's me. Glad to have had this chance. Thank you for the opportunity. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Or if someone thinks of a question once they get a copy of the slides, please drop me a note or give me a call. I'll be happy to help you out.
That's great, Tom. Thank you so much, man. That's really good information. And what I like about the information that you shared today is it's completely relatable across different sizes of organizations, because smaller organizations face I don't even know how to recruit a board member because we haven't done anything yet, or we're so struggling, but you covered that as well. And those are really good. And I just want to say, because Tom wouldn't do this for himself, but I will. I've read both of Tom's books, and so if you those are just gold mines of information. And so get your highlighter out, get your pen out, and work through those things. They are very much worth your time and energy to read. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Best wishes.
Just a couple more items for you guys before you leave as we switch out. I did mention before that we come alongside all sorts of smaller ministries and doing multiple things. We run everything we do here at the Alliance through 4 buckets: Alliance Consulting, Digital, Finance, and Learning. And those 4 buckets kind of feed all the other stuff that we do. And so if you're in need, or you just need to have a sounding board over some stuff going on in your organization operationally, or have a quick question, whether you're a member of the Alliance or not, we make ourselves available to kind of help you walk through some of those things for your organization. So we want you to make sure that that was available for you. Follow us online at our Twitter feed right there on the slide, and or our website, and we'll make sure you get the information that you need. Thank you so much for joining us. I didn't see any questions come in, and so I assume there are no questions there. Please understand that every registration for today's webinar will get an email after we end here that will have a link to the recording, as well as a PDF of all the slides and a link back to Tom's website where you can download all of his materials that he notified or noticed and made note of, I should say, in today's presentation. So again, thank you for joining us. This has been the Christian Ministry Alliance webinar through our Alliance Learning Service on recruiting a successful board. Tom, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone.